Chapter 10. The Secret Violinist. Outside Paris, 1866. Welcome to Monte Cristo, my dear friends. Victor, have you met my son? Alex, mon fils, have you met Victor Hugo? Alexandre Dumas greeted his guests warmly as they entered his grand chateau. Victor, Alexandre continued, did I mention that my son's novel has been turned into an opera? He can't sing a lick, but it hardly matters. La Traviata, they call it. Mon fils, tell Victor what happened. Of course, father, Alex replied. A few years ago, Maestro Verdi attended a performance of my play, La Dame aux Camélias, and was so taken with it that he set it to song. However, due to censorship laws in Venice, they had to change the setting back to the 1700s. Modern politics are unsettling for the Italians at present. Still, Verdi isn't exactly trying to stifle any of it. Nor should he, Alexandre cheered, raising his glass. Indeed, Hugo added with a nod. The opera is being performed across the globe, even in America. It did come through Paris a couple of years ago, though it was in Italian, Alex continued. A dreadful language, Alexandre remarked. Completely ruined the thing. French is much more nuanced. It just sounds romantic. The Italian arias are overrun with consonants. Don't misunderstand me. I have a great fondness for the Italians. Most of them, at least. Not the Sicilians, but their language receives far too much credit at the opera. I've heard of La Traviata, though I've not seen it yet. Rumor said the opening night left much to be desired, Hugo noted. He had been rather sour-tempered all evening. You're always such a pessimist, Victor, Alexandre shot back with a chuckle. At that moment, Ada approached the group. Why, yes, Monsieur Hugo, but that was due to their choice of actress, not the skill of the librettist. A strong female lead is vital. The soprano they hired was far too old and stout to portray Violetta. I find her character very similar to your Esmeralda. Both beautiful, tragic heroines from the fringes of society who seek passionate but ultimately doomed love. Can you imagine such a corpulent and aged Esmeralda? It ruined the entire production. I don't suppose you believe that you'd have done it better. You are so delightfully unhampered by the shackles of talent, Hugo retorted with a sneer. He wasn't fond of Ada, finding her too young for his old friend and too American and brash for the refined French company. His words bit, but she would not give him the satisfaction. I adore singing and dancing. I might have fit the role, but I've never pursued the operatic stage, though I'd love to take on Lucretia Borgia one day, she added with a sly smile. I write the plays, not the cast lists, Hugo murmured. I much prefer French librettos, Hugo's wife interjected, hoping to insert herself into the conversation. Hugo had been rather icy with her since her retaliatory love affair several years before. Well then, you're in luck, Adele, Alex stated proudly. Last year, they translated it back into French. It hasn't been performed here yet, but I'm working on that. I'll make time when it returns, Victor replied. Speaking of Verdi, I hear he had something to say about Italy's unification. All those kingdoms coming together. It'll take some getting used to, no matter how much your father waxes poetic about it. Oh, but I have such intriguing things to say, my old friend, Alexandre laughed. Yes, they turned his name into a slogan, Vittorio Emanuele, Re d'Italia, Alexandre Fee added. How is the name of the king in any way relevant to Verdi? Ada asked, struggling to keep pace with the sudden leap from theater to politics. She was determined to stay relevant and engaged in the conversation, especially with Hugo in the room. The acronym, mon petit oiseau, Alexandre Dumas chuckled. Honestly, it's a good thing you're so beautiful. The men erupted in laughter. Ada, as was expected of women, bit her tongue, though her eyes flashed with disdain at the slight. Oh, little actress, lighten up, won't you? Have a laugh, Victor added patronizingly. I do not often laugh, sir, as you may perceive by the air of my countenance. But nevertheless, I retain the privilege of laughing when I please, Ada responded with sharp precision. The room fell into a stunned silence, captivated by the unfolding duel of wits. Ada knew this fiery outburst was unlikely to help her theatrical aspirations, but when her temper ran hot, her passions overtook her, and she was powerless to control the kandake inside herself. "There are subtleties in these matters, mademoiselle, that I fear someone of your youth and reputation may not fully grasp," Victor replied, his tone brimming with condescension. "Do I not? I have earned my place within these walls here tonight, monsieur, just as you have, through diligence, a deep reverence for art, and our love for our most gracious host," she declared. "You are very amiable, no doubt, but you would be charming if you would only depart," Victor retorted with a smirk. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. "Victor, please be reasonable," Adele interjected. "And yet, monsieur, I believe I shall remain," Ada replied firmly, her resolve unshaken. "Your blatant disregard for our customs shows how juvenile you truly are," Hugo retorted. He was inching closer to her, threateningly. "I have never wished to offend you, monsieur," she said, trying to quell the rising tide. "I greatly doubt that. You are a fool." "If it is one's lot to be cast among fools, one must learn foolishness," the crowd whispered frantically. Victor sighed, leaning into his next spinule. "Ada, little bird," he said, dripping with lordliness, "you are truly misérable." Alexandre could not suppress a snort. Ada shot him a withering look. "I'm sorry, mon amour," he said, attempting to stifle his amusement. "But did you catch that? It is his book." Ada was not amused. "Very clever, Victor." Her furious gaze never left Alexandre. Not much gave their magnanimous host pause, but Ada had found a way. "What? No wine?" Alexandre blurted out awkwardly, desperate to shift the conversation. Ada sighed, regaining her composure. "I shall fetch a glass for you, my love," she replied, her voice monotonous. She would leave it to Alexandre to clean up the mess she had just laid. Thankfully, he had a magnetic personality. She was sure he would think of something. "Well, that was a delightful digression," Victor remarked. "But let us return to more masculine topics. I grow weary of feminine emotionality." The men chuckled in agreement. Ada turned away, her smile practiced but hollow as she moved to find a glass of wine. She was fed up with the insufferable egos of these prestigiously patriarchal authors. Her aspirations on the Parisian stage were within reach, but first she needed to prove to Hugo that she was more than just a passing fancy for Alexandre. Meanwhile, Alexandre regaled his guests with tales of his adventures in Italy. She knew how deeply Alexandre yearned to live up to his father's legacy, but they were huge shoes to fill. Italy had become Alexandre's battleground, but the Sicilians were less than thrilled with his involvement. "Those bastards are the same kin that imprisoned my father. I was at war with the Sicilian king. No, I'm not exaggerating," he boasted, recounting his exploits. The talk of Italy had brought a whisper of French politics to the Chateau Monte Cristo. The mention of Alexandre's illustrious father unlocked a floodgate of memories, allowing echoes of the Revolution to drift into the room like the remnants of a terrible storm. With each glass of wine, the guests spoke more openly about the upheavals of the past. Conversation flowed smoothly until one young, inexperienced guest, ignorant of the delicate decorum required at such gatherings, made a misguided joke about Napoleon Bonaparte. The room quickly turned to utter silence, all eyes fixed on Alexandre Dumas. For years, Alexandre had carefully masked his deep-seated disdain for the man who had crowned himself Emperor of France. Those familiar with his history knew well that the subject struck a raw nerve, capable of unsettling the entire evening. The Parisian elite were all too aware of how Napoleon had wronged the Dumas family long ago, but no one dared speak of it openly. For the older generation, the specter of the Revolution and the ruthless Jacobins who guillotined citizens by the thousands still lurked in their memories. It was during that era of the Reign of Terror that the word terrorist was born, and the people gave it deference in honor of those lost. The guests had grown up with their parents' whispered fears, trained to avoid criticizing the government, lest they lose their heads. This unspoken code had been passed down, and even in their twilight years, the French remained wary of speaking ill of the Revolution or Napoleon, despite his fall from power a generation earlier. The younger guests were more brazen, but for established figures like Dumas and Hugo, mentioning Napoleon was simply not done, especially while the man's nephew still held the French throne. All eyes were still turned on Alexandre, wondering how he would respond to the mention of the monster of Europe. But Dumas, enigmatic as always, shouted loudly, "I've got it!" They stared at their gregarious host curiously. "What is the difference between a Jacobin and a soprano?" Alexandre asked, his eyes glinting with mischief. His guests exchanged puzzled looks, whispering guesses amongst themselves. Then, rising to his feet and lifting his glass with exuberance, he declared, "You can negotiate with a Jacobin." Alexandre erupted into self-congratulatory laughter, and Hugo, caught off guard, nearly spat out his drink in amusement. The mood lightened instantly. Alexandre had a talent for lifting spirits. "Speaking of music," Alexandre continued, "well, I may not have a soprano here tonight, though I fully intend to make my Ada sing like one later." Raucous laughter emerged from the boys' club of authors in attendance. "Though," Alexandre pressed on, "I do have something special for you this evening. A private concert in the parlor. But let me be clear, this performance is a secret that must remain within these walls. The music you will hear tonight was burned by the very man whose name silenced this party just moments ago." "How very thrilling," Adele murmured. A ripple of excitement coursed through the room as the guests began to make their way to the parlor. The Chateau Monte Cristo shimmered in the moonlight, its opulent facade illuminated by the glow of lanterns. Inside, the guests mingled as they found their seats beneath the gilded chandeliers. Though the parlor was not grand in size, the opulence of its decor captivated the eye. Every corner was brimming with such intricate detail that one could lose hours in a single room and still not grasp its full splendor. The guests chattered excitedly as they gathered for the clandestine concert. Alexandre Dumas stood at the front, conversing with the musicians, his eyes alight. Ada moved gracefully through the crowd, her beauty radiantly countering her bruised pride, as she positioned herself near Alexandre. With a perfect chord, the music began. A haunting melody drifted through the air like a whisper in the wind. It was the music of the Chevalier de Saint-Georges, the legendary composer and swordsman whose legacy had long been shrouded in mystery and intrigue among the French elite. The Chevalier's life was interwoven with that of the Dumas family, their histories converging during the heat of the French Revolution. The audience was spellbound as the string quartet filled the room with their enchanting melodies, weaving a tapestry of sound that seemed to transcend time and space. The musicians practically sparkled under the lights, taking in all the applause that their audience so enthusiastically gave. But the lead violinist, despite his higher role in the ensemble, seemed to shirk from the attention. He was an older man. His skin was dark and held deep-set wrinkles. From looking at him, aged as he was, many in attendance would have expected his movements to be slow and jaunted. However, his bow moved with fluid grace, guiding the violins to a crescendo that soared to the heavens, living the Chevalier's legacy with every note he played. Then, to the astonishment of all, the old man began a violin duel with the second violinist, a much younger man. Though the young man played beautifully, there was something special in the old man's performance. It was full of emotive passion and fury. For the audience, the song was a glimpse into a world long forgotten, where the secrets of the past snuck into the present just long enough to be sung and then once again disappear. But the music left a feeling with listeners that would live in their memories forever. As the final notes faded into the crooks of the intricately carved ceiling, the audience erupted in applause. The music had been nothing short of exquisite. While Ada and the other guests rushed to the more extroverted musicians to discuss the melodies they had just savored, Alexandre Dumas approached the older violinist, who had discreetly withdrawn to a shadowed corner of the parlor as soon as the final bow was complete. "Bravo," Alexandre said quietly. "A stunning performance." "Thank you," the old violinist said appreciatively. "I've always believed that music expresses that which cannot be put into words, and that which cannot remain silent." "I couldn't agree more," Alexandre replied, his voice laced with admiration. "I was particularly moved by the 6/14 accord. There was a subtlety, a lyrical quality, as if the music held a secret, one yet to be unveiled to its listeners." "What makes you say that?" the old man asked. "I'm rather skilled at hiding secret messages within my own art. I've become quite adept at finding it in others." There was a touch of daring in Alexandre's tone. "You performed those songs as if you wrote them yourself. Few people can connect to music in that way, especially the Chevalier's music." The old violinist responded, "The Chevalier de Saint-Georges died many years ago, sir." "He did indeed. I recall my parents speaking of him with great fondness. He was a dear friend of my father," Alexandre stated. "I have heard," the violinist replied. "Your family's history is well known in my community." "Was it your father who taught you music?" Alexandre inquired. "No, sir. I never knew my father," the man said softly. "A pity," Alexandre remarked. "And your mother?" "She was a wonderful woman," the old violinist said nostalgically. "My mother raised me on her own, a challenging feat in times such as these." "I understand the difficulty of a woman raising a family unaided," Alexandre said, his voice growing more somber. "It became my story, too, after my father's passing. Your family ended up in London, did they not?" The man hesitated, and Dumas' eyes gleamed as if he knew information even the violinist might not fully grasp. "This conversation is rather personal, my lord," the violinist replied cautiously. "This is the Chateau Monte Cristo," Alexandre retorted lightly. "Here the wine flows as liberally as the stories, and stories are far more intriguing when they are personal. Shall we pour you a glass?" "I do not entertain wine at parties," the old man replied. "So much worse for those who fear wine, for it is because they have thoughts which they are afraid the liquor will extract from their hearts," Alexandre retorted. "Sir, I fear you are seeking an admission that I am unable to make," the violinist replied in earnest. "Perhaps I am," Alexandre said, catching himself a little. For the information he desired truly may be a dangerous truth to some. "You know, you look like him," the Chevalier, Dumas said. The old man, thinking quickly, replied, "Perhaps I do. I possess that certain je ne sais quoi, do I not?" "If by je ne sais quoi you mean something that we can all very much sais quoi, if you mean that your father was black, then yes, you certainly do," Alexandre said with a smirk. "Don't worry. As you see, I do too. We make a rather remarkable spectacle in this Parisian crowd." The violinist looked clearly uncomfortable at the conversation, but Alexandre was relentless. "I know there is a reason you play the Chevalier's music so flawlessly. Why, you have devoted your life to study music that was banned by Napoleon. I believe your connection to the Chevalier is, in fact, more personal." The corner where the two men stood fell into a contemplative silence. Finally, Alexandre spoke softly. "Have no fear. I won't expose you." The old violinist offered a small, appreciative smile and nodded. "Just know, sir," Alexandre continued, "that I am honored to meet you, and I am sorry. He landed in much the same fate as my father did in the end." The old man nodded solemnly. "That they did. But my mother, Marie Josephine, worked to keep his memory alive. She was a talented musician and composer in her own right. Yet, just as our skin kept us on the margins, so too did her femininity." "Is she the one who trained you?" Alexandre asked, intrigued. "She was," the old man replied proudly. "You can tell. You play his music with love and pain," Alexandre said. "Well, that is what it means to be black in Paris during the French Revolution. Love and pain," the violinist reflected. "To be black in Paris," Alexandre repeated quietly. "If only we had champagne glasses. I would toast to that," he joked lightly. "My mother always spoke so highly of the Chevalier. I was never allowed to meet him, but the stories were extraordinary," the old man said. "Sit with me," Alexandre gestured, pulling 2 chairs from the concert area into their unassuming corner. Several party guests attempted to draw Alexandre back into the crowd, but he waved them off. For just this moment, he had no desire to be the bon vivant. He simply wished to converse in private. When they had once again found their peace, Alexandre continued. "It is truly a shame you can't come out openly about your parentage. Some, like myself, would welcome you with open arms." "Perhaps," the old man said sadly, "but I am the product of a notorious affair. Not only am I the disgraced son of a musical adversary to the French Empire, but also a bastard." "Posh!" Alexandre nearly spat. "All great men have affairs and the children that come with them. One of mine is right over there," he called out, his voice booming across the room. "Mon fils, fetch a glass of champagne for my guest." "Of course, father," Alex responded eagerly. He turned back to the violinist. "I know you said you don't drink at parties, but I think we are past that now, are we not?" The old violinist shrugged. "I suppose you know my great secret, so there is no harm in some bubbly. That boy getting your drink is from a rather feisty dressmaker. I have a few others as well, but Alex is the only bastard I keep nearby. Look around this room. Most of these great men have illegitimate children of their own. You're in good company." "Perhaps that is some comfort," the old man conceded. "But I think I'll keep my name to myself." "Very well, fille de chevalier." "Your secret remains here," Alexandre said with a wink. "But let us reminisce. I grew up hearing so many stories about your father. I'm eager to hear from your perspective." "You seem to ask questions to which you already know the answers, monsieur," the violinist replied. "Perhaps I enjoy proving my own brilliance," Alexandre chuckled. "The truth is, sir, I don't know much of my father's story beyond his music. I can feel much of what he felt through the notes on the page, but the stories are lost to me. My mother shared some, but she had a reputation to protect, and I fear many secrets have been lost to history," the violinist admitted. "Did you know your father was my father's tutor in Paris?" Alexandre asked. "I did," the violinist replied succinctly. "I can only imagine the spectacle. Picture it," Alexandre said, his hand painting the scene before them. "Thomas Alexandre Dumas, in his youth, sparring with the legendary Chevalier de Saint-Georges, swords clashing, 2 African savants, making all the young French daughters swoon." The 2 men laughed. "I heard that this chateau sits on your family's old land. Could they have sparred on these very grounds?" the violinist asked. Alexandre could sense the man's yearning to find some physical connection to his lost father within these walls. "I regret not. Though it isn't far from where the Académie de Nicolas Texier de la Bézière once stood," Alexandre explained. "Is the school gone?" Regrettably, yes. During the Revolution, the Académie and many other buildings were burned. Even my own family home fell to the flames of Liberté, Égalité, Fraternité, Alexandre said. I'm sorry. It was a tragic time, the violinist replied sympathetically. Certainly. But when I had the chance, I endeavored to create a chateau my father would have been proud of. Something fantastical to honor his legacy and sacrifice, Alexandre said. I am sure he would be impressed. Your home is unlike anything I have ever seen. That was my greatest hope, Alexandre said excitedly. This room was designed by a man from Tangiers. The two looked around at the Moroccan-inspired room. The stained glass glistened in the candlelight, highlighting the intricately detailed ceiling. Even the seating itself bore a distinctive African elegance. You spared no expense, the violinist remarked. That I didn't. My main architect, not the one from Tangiers, but the one who did most of the house, was afraid to tell me the cost at first because it was so high, Alexandre laughed. But I wasn't disillusioned. I have expensive tastes. That much is apparent. But it is perfection, the violinist murmured. I understand why you keep your past hidden, Alexandre said, suddenly quite solemn. But I wish you would reconsider. Our fathers gave everything to this country. Even before them, our ancestors fought, toiled, and even perished. Yet we remain. The whites in power tried to silence us, to erase our stories, to suppress our songs. Yet we endure. We build chateaux, we write books, we create extraordinary music. The old violinist nodded in quiet contemplation. Alexandre pressed on. Growing up, my mother told me that without the Chevalier, my father would never have become the great man he was. The violinist smiled. Suddenly, Alex came over, 2 glasses of champagne in his hand. Your drink, father. Maestro, what have you been hiding yourself away for? I have been enjoying the company of this talented musician, Alexandre replied. Oh? Did you discuss anything interesting? Alex inquired. Alexandre retorted with a grin. Just the ravings of old men far wiser than you. Of course, father, Alex responded, before turning to the violinist. Your music was extraordinary, monsieur, he said politely. Thank you, the old violinist replied, offering a slight bow. Joseph Bologna, a pleasure to make your acquaintance. A grin curled on Alexandre's lips. Joseph Bologna, like the Chevalier? Alex asked. The violinist smiled.